A-Rod despises Schefter, so he'd probably come to the Vikings simply out of spite. That would be quite an angle if that ended up tipping the scales. Sean Salisbury, for the anti-Rodgers coming to Minnesota crowd, was straight fuel, right? Because what I got from Sean was, I don't think he'd be repulsed by it, but he raises the fair issues, which is, well, at this point, yeah, I can see why Rodgers want to come here, but I would make him come to you. Now, I'm not sure Rodgers is capable of working that way, but he certainly, I think Salisbury put it more on the basis of, I'm not sure anymore. I'm not sure enough anymore that I want to go down that road. I might prefer starting the clock on the new guy, bringing a veteran as insurance to help out, not to start realistically, but to be there to help out. And if there's an injury, somebody who's competent enough that can come in and throw a pass, right? So based on the soundbite we played from Salisbury the other day, I thought he was going to be a little more positive on it than he was. So
right.
There's really there's no new news, right? There's nothing new to report.
Haven't seen it
that I've seen. So now I'm beginning to think this thing might, drag on for another week. Who knows? And what I can't tell right now, because nationally, I think the perception is, well, the teams involved are all waiting on him, that he's kind of waiting to make a decision. They're waiting on him to make a call. But I don't know that it's ever that simple, because there have to be terms.
Yeah.
What he might have in mind might be very different than, even if the Vikings are entertaining this, they're not going to give him a blank check, right? I don't think. So I don't even know if it's as simple as, well, everybody's kind of waiting for A-Rod to kind of make a call. Because clearly the Giants are desperate enough that they would take him, because they're that desperate right now. The Steelers, I guess, probably are too.
I think those two are in the same camp.
They don't want otherwise they would have already brought back Russell Wilson, right?
Yeah.
Realistically,
I'm thinking the beat shots of A-Rod that we talked about yesterday.
Yes.
That was him mulling over the Giants and Steelers and hoping that someone with the Vikings is going to call him back, and he's probably texting Mike Silver and Diana Rossini and saying,
"Keep it going."
Has anybody said anything? Have you heard anything from Kwesi?
Can you plant another report that
What's Alec
the Vikings
Lewis
are
say?
Really, yeah?
Because that's what I'm really waiting for here. Because it does seem like that's what he's waiting for, and that's why he's making these other teams wait. Because otherwise, I think you've got two legitimate suitors.
Yes, and then maybe that's it.
And so, unless you're waiting for something else, which right now isn't coming,
you're waiting for the 11th hour governor's reprieve, which we talked about the other day, to save you from your execution. You may look at going either place as akin to, a quarterback execution, because you don't like your chances to do much there.
Pittsburgh seems nice.
Pittsburgh's better than New York.
Totally.
I don't know if Pittsburgh's great. It's better than New York,
that's
for
fair.
sure. But I think most people would say logically, especially after all the free agency moves, that this would be more ready-made for him to be effective, or have a better chance to be effective. So, interesting comments there. Although it's worth noting, Salisbury does like the other moves, especially at the line of scrimmage, that this team indeed made.
You should have heard him off there. He's like, "Oh God, I bet you can't wait. What the moves the Vikings have made, unbelievable." Yeah. He was gushing.
There's no arguing with any of them. They're really. I don't. Now again, is it possible some of these players aren't going to be as good as advertised?
Sure.
That's always the case. But these are all legitimate names. I am less worried about the age. I talked about that with Sean, just to cover the ground than some people are. I'm not even that bothered by the injuries, because of the nature of the injuries that took place. And in the case of the center, you got a guy in his prime. Isn't he 27? I think he's 27 years old. So they've, I think, in an off season before the draft, they've done almost all you could ask a team to do to try to address its key issues and get better. And now you're back to, okay, well, is this wrinkle actually mean anything? Is there really something going on at the quarterback position, or is it we just going to run the clock on JJ McCarthy? Why don't we try to stay on schedule? We got Russo at 4:30, correct?
Yes.
We've got Robert Smith at 5:30. I'm very curious to get his views on A-Rod and the team's moves in general as well, and a couple of other things. I do have Ode to a Dead Guy to get to. I also want to go a little deeper on the news that broke early this morning that indeed Ben Johnson is out as the head coach, University of Minnesota men's basketball, after 4 seasons?
Yes.
4 seasons. And because there's a lot of blowback about, for some people it's the decision at all, and for some people it's the method by which Mark Coyle did the dismissal, the firing. And we'll try to get to all of that as well when we return. We'll take a very quick pause first. Don't go. So the Gophers lose in the first round of the Big Ten men's basketball tournament yesterday afternoon to Northwestern. We actually gave you a couple of live listen-ins there. And word broke early this morning that Johnson had been dismissed, that in fact the athletics director at the University of Minnesota, Mark Coyle, met the team when they returned fairly late, apparently, from Indianapolis. I don't know exactly what time it was. And immediately sat Ben down and I assume the staff and said, we're making a change. And every time there's a dismissal, because there's a human element to it, there's a human being on the other end of it, we get into this whole debate and game about, well, God, that's kind of chilly. I mean, you couldn't wait until morning. I mean, why do you have to do it that way? My God. I mean, do you have to be in that big of a hurry? Or it's, well, you could have told them a different way, or you could have told them in person rather than they find out via the media. Well, in this case, I think, if nothing else, I'm assuming Coyle's intent was, I am going to tell them in person.
Yeah.
Before there is anything out in the media, because at that point there had been nothing that had leaked about the possibility. Well, everybody speculated on the possibility, but that there was no reporter saying he's been dismissed. So if you're going to do it, the idea that you're better off waiting till morning, I think it's a distinction without a difference. My guess is it was not a very fun conversation, and it wasn't going to be a very fun conversation no matter how you do it. And to get too hung up on that part of it makes no sense to me. Now, as you've mentioned, and I think you got into some of this on X, there's the added factor in Coyle's case of him presumably returning back to Indy because he's on the selection committee. He's got a lot of responsibilities this week too, and it was, all right, another reason for me to get out front of this thing and do it when I did it. I just don't think, because I got a few texts from people around the country, writers that I know, going, God, 2 a.m. or 1, whatever it was, that's cold.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on the surface, I could see where you think that way, but if you get into the weeds and really pay attention to it, you say, well, there's no good way to do it, and in fact, this is still a better way than something leaking. And the idea that you have to somehow, out of respect for Ben, wait until calling him back to the office at 10 a.m. I don't know what that distinction is, right? So I think we always end up spending too much time evaluating the way it's done. And in this case, I'll never argue we can argue, and some people are, with the decision, but whether it was fair, but I'm never going to argue with face-to-face, where I'm going to tell you directly exactly what we're doing. I mean, that to me, the ones I think are more rippable are that the rumors spread and you don't really worry about it enough. You already know you've made your decision and it somehow leaks, and then that's how the coach finds out. That's tougher, although even that sometimes is unavoidable. But in this case, there was no leak because a press release was released by the University of Minnesota, right? That was the confirmation that they'd had this meeting and he had done what he did.
They'd had the meeting, the team had been informed, the assistants and staff had been informed, and then the release was sent out. When it's an abrupt one like this, there is no good way.
No.
When it's like, even going back to firing Richard, everybody kind of knew what was going on there, right? That was a slow march, kind of a slow drip, slow burn. Yes. They're probably going to have to make a change. There was build up to it. They even let him, find another job, which he did, essentially. They kind of gave him the weekend to do that. He's coaching at New Mexico right now in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. When it's this, and we said this yesterday, or at least I did, my opinion was whatever was going to happen needed to be done as quickly as possible because he has been on the hot seat all year. There has been so much speculation and conversation about his job. And it's not Mark Coyle's fault that the team charter didn't take off until 10:30.
Exactly.
So now when I went home, because people were asking me about it the last couple of days, as you can imagine, what do you think? And I said, I could see anything happening. I think the fact that Mark has been so quiet the last couple of months, he's always quiet. But I feel like if he was going to keep him, he probably would have said something a few weeks ago.
The declaration we talked about.
Yeah, and that never happened. So my antenna was up on that. And when you get home, and I'm just kind of curious, I'm thinking he's probably going to want to do it in person because that is how Mark wants to do it. Whatever you think of it, he doesn't want to fire a coach over Zoom or a phone call. I think he feels like he owes it to the individual, whoever it is, to do it in person,
right.
Which I think we could all understand. I think people would appreciate that. And you notice that there's a private plane that left flying cloud that's going to Indy and turned right back around and is in the air. You go, that's when I went to bed last night thinking it's done. Like, I didn't wait for it. I kind of figured, and I had no inside info. That was a big coincidence to me. And so I had no problem with the middle of the night thing. People are focusing on the wrong stuff.
Yeah. And they often
it is
do.
what it is.
They often do. And it's trite to say it, but it is true. I don't think, whether it's slow or fast, I don't think there's ever, quote unquote, a good way to do it. That's the problem. It's always going to be messy to varying degrees in different ways, depending on whether it's going to be a slow deal or a fast deal. But the truth of the matter, too, is if you're going to move on to something else, you want to get started.
Yes.
That's just the nature of aren't there some dates? I think there's some significant dates already coming up within the next month.
Portal opens in like 10 days.
Right. So you do it as fast as you can indeed do it. Now, for me, the number one question we can also debate whether you got to find a way to have a public news conference before you go back to Indy. That's a fair point where you go, well, I'm not going to, because it can be perceived as, well, you sent out a statement, but you're kind of hiding from it a little bit, and you don't want to hide from it. You want to say, this is a move that's not fun to make, but I feel like we had to make. Now, he's ultimately trying to backtrack a little bit. He's got a Q&A. There's a Q&A at StarTribune.com in which he extended Q&A.
Yeah. He talked to the two beat writers today, Marcus Fuller and Andy Greeter.
He did answer a bunch of questions from each of them. So to that extent, is that a press conference? No, but he has made himself available. For me, I thought this was inevitable. I think it had to happen. But here's what I'll say, and this is where it gets tricky. There's a part of me that if I'm running the entire University of Minnesota, I'm saying, how many bites at the apple does this guy get? Am I confident? I mean, let's remember something. And I'm trying to be fair to everybody here. There was nobody in the country thinking about hiring Ben Johnson, even if they liked Ben Johnson as a coaching candidate, about hiring Ben Johnson to be a Big Ten level head coach when Coyle did what he did. So we're back to at what point do you start having to evaluate the evaluator and say, how much confidence do you have that, given this will be his second, right? Because he didn't hire Patino, obviously.
Right.
His second shot at this, that he's going to do a good job with it. The questions to me that would be front, if I had Coyle on, it would be, well, I mean, how do we not look upon this hire as a failure? I mean, you took a very significant gamble. In my opinion, part of the reason was the money, because he could get him very cheap. And so how about that? How about owning that part of it, that he didn't get here, magically. He got here because you decided to hire him in the position. And the assumption is now he's going to go more of a heavyweight, that he now understands he's going to have to spend more money, which was my point in the beginning. This is what universities sometimes do. They do the bit where, we're going to try to get by a little easy here, and then we'll help. If he gets going good, we'll give him more money or give her more money. But in the front end, you're like, yeah, but you might be dooming this from the start, or you're making this this can be a significant gamble. Do you really have to take it? So the assumption is there's going to be more money to spend. The assumption is he's going to try to go somebody who's been established as a head coach, right? And then you're down to, as we talked about yesterday, there's two choices. There's the up-and-comer that you can get, that you really like, and make the next step. And then there's the retread. Are there any retreads that you would consider, or are they too damaged? And the name you and I have talked about off-air is the guy who's been a guest on this program. It's Tom Crean. And my assumption is Crean would be interested.
Mine too.
But I don't know. I have no idea whether the AD, Coyle, would be. my assumption also is I don't think you'd have to break the bank for Crean. But I could be wrong there too. I have absolutely no idea. But that's what we're basically at here now, right? And, Chip's got a good column online already today kind of reacting to this thing. And there's been a lot of discussion still about the arena. And I did think it was interesting that in the Q&A with the Star-Tribune, we're going to have to break here, but the Q&A in the Star-Tribune, it looked very clear to me like Coyle was downplaying and almost dismissing.
I read that too.
All the folks like you who said we got to burn that place down.
I read that too.
And so I don't know if that's just his reality because he doesn't think he's got the cojones right now or the goods to start a campaign to finance it, or that he really believes that it's a red herring of an issue. I think it's an issue. I don't think it's quite as big an issue as you and Johnny Athletic do, and even Chip. But I think it's part of the equation. I don't think it can be dismissed. But I don't think it's all of it. I still think it's about attempting to get the right person. And I guess the other question that I want to ask Coyle right now is, well, how do you look back on dismissing Richard Pitino? Right? Because you did two things. You felt you had to make that move, and you replaced him with a guy who has not even reached the levels that Richard did, right? Not even close.
Right.
So I think at some point you have a right to the person who's in charge who makes those two decisions to say, let's go back and look at let's go back and take a long hard look at those again and explain yourself on are you acknowledging maybe you blew it on Richard? Now Richard's Big Ten record wasn't pristine, right? Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, to me, this is now not just about who the next coach is. I think it's a little bit about Mark Coyle being on the clock and being a little bit on probation. Now, he successfully hired a football coach. There's no denying that. And the signs are good. The University of Minnesota women's basketball.
Right, with his second
ways
crack
to go.
there.
With a second crack there. But that's all got to be into there. Anything real quick before we'll have time later to get back to this for sure.
No, not really. But I do think, like you said, now it's what do you do now?
Yeah.
In terms of the financial commitment to your head coach, because Ben was $1 million shy of the next lowest paid Big Ten coach. And that was, I think, by design. And that's a thing that goes above even Coyle, I think. He even alluded to that in the Q&A where he said, we have a president and a board of regents where we're going to do things fiscally responsibly and we're going to balance our budgets and all of that.
Yeah.
Like that, I think, that worries me a little bit because it's the whole thing. To me, it's a three-prong investment. You hire a head coach, you pay what it costs.
Yes.
You say, this is what we're doing with rev sharing. We're going to fundraise like hell for NIL. And whatever you're doing with Williams Arena, come out with it now. Whether we're renovating it, building it, because this is a great time to put a total commitment behind basketball.
And what is the he needs to love Minnesota thing? Well, what does that even mean? Seriously, what's that about?
Did he say love or understand or get? I can't remember.
He said love. It's like, well, just get a good coach who's done this before. There's always risk, right? Especially if they're not coaching at the same level. But I don't know. I understand what the Minnesota part of this thing is. I mean, is there something that unique about us that we have to be? If there's uniqueness, it's that we just haven't made any of the commitments that you need to make at some point. That may be why, if there's any uniqueness to it, that's it. And you have to eradicate that uniqueness, or you're going to be sitting here in the same position probably 4 years from now. Your Minnesota Wild back in action tonight on the Fan. I believe it's the Rangers, if I'm not mistaken. And
yes,
so
sir.
What better time than now to chat with Russo Radio, as we do each and every week, different days of the week. In his case, he joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. Do you have any whopper stories when it comes to good or bad dismissals of coaches that you have covered?
There's never really great dismissals.
No, that's true.
But one of the great stories, it's not a hockey story, but I don't know if you remember, and you could probably Google this. It was probably 2016 maybe, when the New York Braves were playing the New York Mets, and Freddie Gonzalez was their manager, and they lose to the Mets, and he goes back to his hotel room, and he looks at his phone, and he suddenly had a Delta notification with a flight of his the next morning to Atlanta. and that's how he found out that he was fired.
Oh.
So before telling him that he was fired, if I remember the story correctly, they had booked his flight home, but since they used his frequent flyer number, he got the notification that he had a flight home. So he had a pretty good sense that he was in trouble.
At least he got the miles.
Yeah,
they were nice enough to use his frequent flyer number.
Exactly. That's the way I would want to get fired.
Oh, that's...
but that's one of the, I mean, in hockey, I mean, there was the famous one about 5 or 6 years ago. Florida was in Carolina, and Tom Rowe, and it was actually it had to be longer than there. It was when they were going through the ridiculous ownership stuff, and all of a sudden, Gerard Gallant got fired in Carolina, and he hailed a cab after the game, and there were all sorts of pictures from AP and all that stuff. There's no easy way to get fired, that's for sure. I mean, I've talked to you about that before. I mean, it's always amazing, like, that first press conference when it's like, everything's so happy, and they have the coach put on the jersey and put the ball cap on, and you just know that 3-4 years later it's going to end in an ugly, ugly fashion.
Always does.
So it was just interesting, the whole thing with Ben Johnson yesterday and the timing of it. And, as a beat writer, it's kind of cool that it was almost like Mark Coyle was making sure nobody would get scooped. We're just going to announce it. We're not going to wait till the morning and have the beat writers wake up and some national guy is going to tweet out that Ben Johnson was fired last night. So it was kind of interesting the way that it was done.
Yeah, that's why I can't even argue with it, even if it's 2 a.m, because he's trying to stay in control of it. He's trying to say, okay, I don't want rumors to get out. I don't want to mess with this. What's the point? I mean, is it going to hurt Ben any worse at 2 a.m. or 1:30, whatever it was, than 10 this morning? It's going to hurt either way. It's his man's livelihood, right? It's never going to be pleasant. And I think we get too hung up on that. Now, are there some extreme cases? There was who was the Viking that got cut allegedly? Was it like Christmas Eve?
Marcus Robinson.
Childress cut Marcus Robinson. You say, well, that's a little on the chilly side. Is there, no pun intended, might there be a little better timing there? So, I mean, I'm not standing tall for cruelty. I'm just saying I think the truth, as you say, is there is no good way to do it. That does not exist. By definition, you're taking away a person's job. And so there's not ever going to be any good way to do that.
No, and it's just always an interesting vocation that all these guys lead. I mean, you are literally in 98% of the times hired to be fired.
Yeah, that's right.
It's always going to end badly, no matter how many. You could win cups and championships and all that. You're eventually going to lose your job, and you're going to leave there all pissed off. And it's just the strangest vocation that we all cover, or that we all cover, and that they're in.
Can we get on a winning streak at home?
I mean, Rangers are not, I've watched their games lately and they're playing better, but they haven't won some games lately. They're going to come in desperate tonight. They're a good hockey team. They bleed chances though, and that's the big thing. And so, the Wild have to take advantage of that tonight. The Wild have done a really good job in at least 2 of the last 3 games of generating chances. They just don't finish very easily, and I don't think they're going to finish very easily for the rest of the year until they get guys back. But yeah, I mean, they're starting to play at least a little better at home. They're starting to kill penalties. They're definitely keeping their goals against down. But offensively, they just leave themselves, Dan, for no room for error. Just with the way that they can't score right now. And it's really amazing how hard it has been for them to score goals.
You guys, I quoted parts of the piece with Luigi when he was in studio Monday. Already, of course, he basically came here to pay his taxes, and then he's gone again, obviously, because it's still too chilly for him, even though it's in the 50s.
Yeah.
So
he also just played for some more money for the World Juniors. So
that's right.
We were doing a lot of Louis business.
Well, you were.
That was a day I also went.
You were with him, right?
I went. I got the whole Louis experience. I met with him and his builder on his expansion that he was doing on his cabin. So Louis had a lot of work to do that 24 hours.
Well, that's the funny thing. Of course, to call it a cabin is quite a misnomer. It's already a compound. But the idea that he's going to apparently add further to the compound, I mean, it's classic Louis. You know, it's. Well,
even the road, like I'm always amazed when we make a left down this road. I won't say the name of it, but I'm like, why isn't it called Nanny Way at this point? Like you own every single piece of property on this road.
That's inevitable for sure.
We're working on that.
There's no doubt that he knows some city commissioner that can easily change the name of that street.
I'm looking at the headline of the story I read from, and it's a piece that you and Joe Smith co-bylined. Wild Insider, pressures on Bill Guerin to turn this team into an actual contender this summer. I thought it was extremely well done. I thought it was tough, but I thought it needed to be written, actually, because the interesting dynamic, we've all been sort of, and Billy and I think the franchise has kind of encouraged this. The idea of, okay, we've been in this salary cap hell, but just wait. Our time is coming, and when it does, look out. And that's going to add a great deal of pressure, because I do think the expectation is we've been in this holding pattern forever, and if there's not a big payoff for fans, I think it could get kind of ugly pretty quickly. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. And Billy, he has mentioned this, the day before or when we were in Vancouver, I can't remember when that would have been, and he said our time is coming. That's not the first time he said that. He has said that for 2-3 years in a row. And so it was sort of our gentle reminder to say the time is now. It's not coming. And sure, you could have every reason, valid or otherwise, to not be able to make moves, whether big or minor at the trade deadline. But enough is enough. The check is due, and it's got to start right now. It really genuinely does, Dan. And they're already starting to talk. Like, remember, we don't have a ton of cap space. And we got to re-sign Kirill and all that type of stuff. And I guess our point is that but there's fans are running out of patience. This has been a long 4 years for everybody. And everybody in the organization, true. Like, trust me. I mean, imagine just being an account executive for the Minnesota Wild the last several years, trying to sell, well, we're paying $15 million less than everybody else, and we haven't won a playoff round since 2014 or 15. It just becomes tiresome. And I think that okay, it's fine, but I could tell you from being in that team hotel after the trade deadline, and I remember the day before talking about how awkward it was that we were actually going to have those players were going to be on the ice as the trade deadline hit. When they got back to that hotel and I was waiting in the lobby for the Bill Guerin presser, players were talking to me. And they weren't exactly thrilled with the fact that there was not any help given to them. And that is something that these players that have been here for many years have felt. They've tried not to use it as an excuse, but they know every night that they're going up against teams that are well more equipped and much deeper because of their cap situation than the Wild. Well, it's over this summer. And so, you can use every excuse. Well, we gotta stand pat because we gotta know what Kirill's thinking. We can't sign him till July 1. And it's enough is enough. They are going to have to go in with a really good plan this summer, be aggressive, make some bold decisions. And I think Billy knows that. But it was, I think we tried to do a fair job to just say that, there have been some moves that have been made the last couple of years that have been hypocritical to what the alleged plan was, and they've wasted some cap space with signings like Trenyon. The move to get Brazeau really has slowed this team even further, and that they are going to have to go out this summer and not just look at free agency, but try to make a bold trade or two. And I think that is something that he's got to be aggressive with, starting with day one of the offseason.
No question. I thought the key section, the key passage in the piece, you mentioned Trenyon and what a disappointment he has been. And you guys then lay out, if the Wild weren't actually a contender needing a piece to get over the hump, why would they make a signing like Trenyon one summer away from getting their cap shackles off? Why give up so many picks, including this year's first rounder, for David, is it pronounced Jurasek? Knowing that there's not really a space for him in the lineup this year and next unless there's a planned trade of Bogosian or Spurgeon that we don't know about. All this has to be factored in, to how you go about evaluating a general manager. It's the idea of, well, how much of you being hamstrung is the cap? How much of you being doubly hamstrung is other moves you've made that has further lessened what your options might be starting this summer.
Well, I mean, just look at the domino effect of Foligno and trust me, Foligno's having a great year, but you extend Foligno and Hartman with Zuccarello. Both of them have bad years. So then what you do is you try to compensate that by going in and signing Trenyon after you let Duham and Dewar go, who could have been re-signed for way less than combined than Trenyon. And then Trenyon's not working out, so you go and add Brazo. So it's just constantly, it's a never-ending cycle of trying to improve on an area that really should have been fixed by just signing Foligno and Hartman. But it's like, to go out and then sign Trenyon for a 4-year, $14 million deal. Now he's playing limited minutes on the fourth line, and who knows if he's even going to start in the playoffs. And then you go and you get rid of two fast players in Lauco and Huzendinov, whether they had a future here or not, and add Brazo, who's barely playing, can't get on the power play, isn't probably going to be re-signed. There's been a lot of moves lately. Like, usually I can see the reasoning in a lot of Billy's moves, and the last couple, I haven't. And what was strange about the press conference that we had in Vancouver is that, the first question out of the gate was just a question on the move to add Brazo. Tell us about him. And he basically, gave like a 6-second answer. It was like he came in there stressed, and it just it kind of took a turn for the worse from there. I think you had him on the radio right after us. So I guess that was the point of the column the other day, is that, like, look, Bill Guerin at the beginning of the season told Joe Smith and me in an interview that we are not serious contenders, that we haven't been since I've been here. And you look at them now, and granted all the injuries, they're still not going to go into the playoffs as serious contenders this year because, again, of the $15 million and the fact that all these other teams are able to make moves, and everybody in the West really loaded up. But this summer is now the time, and there just can't be any more excuses anymore. Like, they have got to, I'm not saying that they got to turn themselves into a Stanley Cup contender by opening night next year, but there just can't be, like, we can't be in the same spot next year and next year and next year. No. Next year is the 25th year of the Minnesota Wild on the ice. There was a lockout, season-ending lockout in there that has delayed things. But next year's year 25. They have one banner up. It's a 17-year banner of a division that doesn't even exist anymore, and a title. Like the fans are tired of this. I'm tired of it. This is why there's fatigue here, and there just comes a point where the honeymoon period's up. And so I just think that this is a big, big summer for this organization.
Do you give me I don't think we've talked much about, is again pronounced Jiricek, however you pronounce for the first round. So why is this gone? I mean, you're not supposed to give up first rounders for guys who don't even play, right? So what is his status? What do Guerin and the coaches, what do they say about this? Because this is an example of something like, well, you keep making these kinds of moves, you're not going to give yourself much of a chance.
Exactly. And again, the second they made that deal, it took him out of any ability to do anything really at the trade deadline. And what cap space or not. And you trade a first, and they traded multiple other picks with it, and a young defenseman that frankly would have 25, 26 games in the lineup right now, and Damon Hunt, just because the second they traded him, Brodin then had a never-ending number of injuries. But he's up here. He's been scratched 6 games in a row. It's nonsensical at a minimum. Send him down to Iowa and just bring somebody else up to spend time with us in the press box. At least he didn't look pleased about it, but at least he was on the ice working with the coaches and Andy Ness well after practice today. So that is at least beneficial to him. And that might be what they're thinking is that this is a kid that, his biggest weakness is his skating. So at least you're working him with Andy Ness, who obviously is a skating guru for a while, and that could be beneficial. But I don't get it, because even the timing of the trade, like there's right now, if Faber, Spurgeon, and Bogosian are back, they're all right shot defensemen. They obviously keep on showing that they're not willing to take Bogosian out of the lineup, even though his play at times show that he warrants it. And, and they're just not playing him. They don't want to take a right shot defenseman at 21 years old and start messing and playing games with them and putting him on the left side. I agree with that. But at some point they've got to put him in the lineup. And right now there's no path even for next year unless there's an injury, unless they're going to tell Bogosian or somebody to really work in the offside season about playing his offside. So I don't get it. As Bill Guerin did say at the time of the trade, it is an investment for the future.
Yeah.
They didn't get him necessarily play now. And the other thing from John Hines' standpoint is that they're defending really, really well right now. It's about the only way that they can win right now because they're having such struggles scoring goals. So from John's perspective, most likely is that he doesn't want to, take a veteran that he trusts out of the lineup and at this stage in the season, take a kid who has not been great from what I hear in Iowa to begin with and just throw him in the lineup just for experimental purposes and to get him playing. Like right now, their playoff hopes are again, in balance here, and it's getting a little hairy right now with not only Calgary and Vancouver winning a lot behind them, but St. Louis and Utah coming really hard. St. Louis has got the easiest schedule down the stretch of any team in the NHL, and so I don't think that he wants to play games with the lineup when whether or not there are hairy moments with Merrill or Bogosian, I don't think he wants to take a kid that he's not fully confident in yet and just throw him in the lineup because he needs to play. That's why I think that they just need to send him down to Iowa and get him playing again. But I think for the time being, just having Andy Ness here most likely is what they're thinking is let him skate with him for a while, and then they'll send him down to Iowa when they need to.
Several listeners are saying that we need to correct you about the banners. We also have the banner for being the number one fans. You forgot about that one.
Yeah, and then they have proven it for 25 years because they're still as low as anybody.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Despite having and you know what? It's going to get harder. Like this league,
yes, it is.
We just saw the expansion rules that the league put in place for Seattle and Vegas. What do you think is going to happen when they expand to 34 teams and are getting $1 billion expansion rights fees? It is just, and then there's going to be, trust me, this league doesn't just want to go to 34. They want to go to 36 soon after that. So, it's just going to get harder and harder to deliver what this fan base wants. And so, I'm not trying to sit there and, kiss up to the fan base, but I think all of us that have been around this organization for a while are just getting sort of at times need to remind, I think deep down Craig Leopold and Matt Maka knows it. But it's time, man. This has been a long 4 years, and now they've got to really come up with a sophisticated plan to make the right moves from now on. Because I just think the last couple years, they haven't made some great moves, and it's all been to add bottom six guys that they're trying to make up for past mistakes that they made. The other bottom six guys.
And those
now when you look back on it, I still don't really understand what the rush was to get rid of Duhaime. Billy never seemed to be the biggest Duhaime fan. Duhaime seemed to me to be the perfect Bill Guerin type player. Tough as nails, fast, big, willing to fight. And he just never seemed to, fall for him. And then he goes and signs in Washington. He's having a really good year. He's making half of what Trenyan's making. It's bizarre to me.
One mistake compounds the next. That's the problem. And then you find yourself further behind the eight ball. Is Gus Bus in the net tonight?
Yep, he is.
He'll be back. Gaardsy, do you have something real quick?
Just to pour salt in a 17-year Northwest Division championship banner wound, I'm pretty sure they lost in the first round of the playoffs that year, didn't they, to Colorado in 2008?
Yeah, God rest his soul. But if you remember, I picked Colorado in 6, and Pavel Demitra and I got into it in the locker room in Denver before Game 1.
Wow.
He was so pissed. He was so pissed at my prediction.
Really?
And and it took every ounce of energy in me after they lost in 6 for me to not go in the locker room and say, I guess I was right. But unfortunately, Pavel's not with us anymore.
Fallness is ripping you for not doing this bit from what he describes the very lonely Bob Kurtz radio center.
That's our fault more than Russo's.
I know. I think it was the timing, right?
Yeah. Too many guests today.
I think it was the timing.
That's the problem.
Yeah. We didn't want to make, as Justin could attest, we didn't want to make Fallness have to come down to the arena early and set up and put the candles up and
clean a little bit. Yeah.
100% true. Thanks, Russo. We'll chat next week.
Absolutely. See ya.
Russo Radio, Wild back in action tonight against the Rangers right here on the Fan. We've got Robert Smith about half hour ode to a dead guy to get to as well. Top 5 will include
Vikings make a small trade, and we'll obviously bring up Ben Johnson, but are the Minnesota Timberwolves, Dan, the team that nobody wants to see in the first round of the playoffs?
PayPal lets you pay all your pals, like your graduation gifters.
Who's paying for the mattress topper?
You mean the beanbag chair?
Aren't we getting a mini fridge?
Can we create a pool on PayPal? It lets us collect the money before we buy.
Ooh, yes, that's smart.
Glad we can agree on something.
Easily pool, split, and send money with PayPal. Get started in the PayPal app. A PayPal account is required to send and receive money. A balance account is required to create a pool.
Optimize your nutrition with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences, like Calorie Smart and Protein Plus. Factor's keto meals can help you lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks. Get started at factormeals.com/factor50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Weight loss with Factor Keto based on a randomized controlled clinical trial. Results will vary depending on diet and exercise.